Welcome to my class of operating system. Today we will learn about introduction to Unix operating system. Unix is a family of multitasking, multi-user computer operating system that derive from the original AT&T Unix development starting in the 1970s at the Bell Labs Research Center. Unix is an operating system. An operating system is the program that controls all the other parts of a computer system, both the hardware and the software. It allocates the computer resources and schedules tasks. It allows us to make use of the facilities provided by the system. Every computer requires an operating system. Unix systems are characterized by a modular design that is sometimes called the Unix philosophy. According to this philosophy, the operating system should provide a set of simple tools, each of which performs a limited, well-defined function. A unified file system and an inter-process communication mechanism known as pipes serve as the main means of communication, and a shell scripting and command language is used to combine the tools to perform complex workflows. Unix distinguishes itself from its predecessors as the first portable operating system. Almost the entire operating system is written in the C programming language, which allows Unix to operate on numerous platforms. Unix was originally meant to be a convenient platform for programmers developing software to be run on it and on other systems rather than for non-programmers. The system grew larger as the operating system started spreading in academic circles and as users added their own tools to the system and shared them with colleagues. At first, Unix was not designed to be portable or for multitasking. Later, Unix gradually gained portability, multitasking and multi-user capabilities in a time-sharing configuration. Unix systems are characterized by various concepts: the use of plain text for storing data, a hierarchical file system, treating devices, and certain types of inter-process communication as files, and the use of a large number of software tools. Small programs that can be compiled together through a command language interpreter using pipes as opposed to using a single monolithic program that includes all of the same functionality. These concepts are collectively known as Unix philosophy. History of Unix OS. The first version of Unix Uniplexed Information and Computing System was created in 1969 by Kenneth Thompson and Dennis Ritchie. They were system or engineers at AT&T's Bell Labs, and in summer 1969 Unix was developed. In 1973 they wrote the Unix kernel in C to make operating system portable to other computer system. In 1977 it is released the first Berkeley software distribution, which becomes known as BSD. The 1978 release of version 7 included the Bond shell for the first time. By 1983, commercial interest was growing and Sun Microsystem produced a Unix workstation. System 5 appeared directly descendant from the original AT&T Unix and the prototype of the more widely used variant today. Unix releases 10 editions between 1971 and 1989. By the early 1980s, users began seeing Unix as potential universal operating system suitable for computers of all sizes. The Unix environment and the client server model were essential element in the development of internet and the reshaping of computing as centered in networks rather than in individual computers. Both Unix and C programming languages were developed by AT&T and distributed to government and academic institutions, which led to both being ported to a wider variety of machine families than any other operating system. The Unix operating system consists of many libraries and utilities along with the master control program, the kernel. The kernel provides services to start and stop program, handles the file system and other common low-level tasks that most programs share, and the schedule access to avoid conflicts when programs try to access the same resource or device simultaneously. To mediate such access, the kernel has special rights reflected in the distinction of kernel space from user space, the latter being a priority realm where most application programs operate. Why we use Unix? One of the biggest reasons for Unix is networking capacity. The networking capability of Unix is a very strong feature. Unix is ideal for such things as worldwide email and connecting to the internet. Because Unix was developed, different people with different needs, it has grown to an operating system that is both flexible and easy to adapt for specific needs. Unix is more secure than Windows. Unix system uses a centralized operating system kernel which manages system and process activities. All non-kernel software is organized into separate kernel managed processes. Unix systems are preemptively multitasking, which means multiple processes can run at the same time or within small time slices and nearly at the same time, and any process can be interrupted and moved out of execution by the kernel. This is known as thread management. Files are stored on disk in a hierarchical file system with a single top location throughout the system, with both files and directories, subdirectories, sub-subdirectories, and so on. With few exceptions, devices and some types of communication between processes are managed and visible as files or pseudo files within the file system hierarchy. This is known as everything is a file. However, Linus Torvalds state that this is inaccurate and may be better rephrased as everything is a system of bytes. So we can say that Unix operating system supports some of the features and capabilities due to that users prefer Unix. Some of the reasons are multitasking and multi-user, programming interface, use of files as abstractions of devices and other objects, built-in networking, that is TCP/IP is standard, persistent system service processes called daemons and managed by init. Features of Unix. Unix is a multi-user, multitasking operating system. Multiple users may have multiple tasks running simultaneously. Unix is a machine-independent operating system, not specific to just one type of computer hardware. Designed from the beginning to be independent of the computer hardware. Unix has software development environment. It was born in and designed to function within this type of environment. Multi-user operating system. Since Unix is a multi-user operating system, so it allows more than one user to share the same computer system at the same time. Multitasking. Multitasking means more than one program can be run at a time. The main concept of multitasking is maximum utilizing CPU resources. It is an open system. The Unix is open source code, that is, any user can modify Unix open source according to their ideas and requirement. Using Unix open source code, several features can be added. Any operating system developed based on Unix open source code is known as flavors of Unix. The Linux was given to GPL, General Public License. Basic structure of Unix. Basic structure of Unix is, in the internal there is system hardware, then kernel, shell, and at the end there is user. So user interact with shell. Shell is intermediate between kernel and user. Similarly, kernel is intermediate between shell and system hardware. System hardware is the core part or the important part of the basic structure. The Unix system is written in high level language, making it easier to read, understand, change, and therefore move to other machines. The code can be changed and complied on a new machine. Customers can then choose from a wide variety of hardware vendors without being locked in with a particular vendor. Unix system hides the machine architecture from the user, making it easier to write applications that can run on micros, mins, and mainframes. Unix is a powerful multitasking operating system. It means when an active task in process, then there can be simultaneous background processes working on. Unix handles these active and background threads efficiently and manages the system resources in a fair share manner. Unix is a multitasking user system designed to support a group of users simultaneously. The system allows for the sharing of processing power and peripheral resources, while at the same time providing excellent security features. The kernel. Now we will learn about the internal part of Unix operating system, which is known as kernel. Kernel interacts with hardware. The Linux kernel is the main component of Linux or Unix operating system and is the core interface between a computer hardware and its processes. It communicates with the two managing resources as efficiently as possible. So we can say that the kernel of Unix is the hub of the operating system. The kernel is so named because, like a seed inside a hard shell, it exists within the OS and controls all the major functions of the hardware, whether it is phone, laptop, server, or any other kind of computers. The kernel mainly has 4 jobs. Memory management. Kernel keeps track of how much memory is used to store what and where. Process management. Determine which processors can use the central processing unit when and for how long. Device driver act as mediator, interrupter between the hardware and the processes. System called and security. It receives request for service from the process. The kernel, if implemented properly, is invisible to the user, working in its own little world known as kernel, where it allocates memory and keep track of where everything is stored. What the user sees is the web browser and file are known as the user space. These applications interact with the kernel through a system called interface. Kernel allocates time and memory to program and handles the file store and communication in response to system call. To put the kernel in a context, we can say that it has three layers: the hardware, the kernel, and the user processes. Kernel is the core of operating system. Its software resides in memory and gives instructions to the CPU. Code executed by the system runs on CPU, kernel mode, or user mode. Code running in the kernel mode has unrestricted access to the hardware, while user mode restricts access to the CPU and the memory to the SCI. A similar separation exists for memory. Separation is done in form of kernel space and user space. So, let us learn about shell. Shell interacts with kernel. A shell provides with an interface to Unix operating system. It gathers input from an execute program based on that input. When a program finishes executing, it displays that program's output. Shell is an environment in which we can run our command, programs, and shell script. There are different factors of a shell, just as there are different factors of operating system. Each flavor of shell has its own set of recognized command and function. Shell reads the user's input after they press enter. It determines the command the user wants executed by looking at the first word of the input. A word is an unbroken set of characters. Spaces and tabs separate word. Following is a simple example of data command which displays the current, date, and time. The shell acts as interface between the users and the kernel. When a user's login programs checks the username and password and then start another program called the shell. The shell is a command line interpreter. It interrupts the command the user types in and arranges for them to be carried out. The commands are themselves program. When they terminate, the shell gives the user another prompt. The basic concept of a shell script is a list of commands which are listed in the order of execution. A good shell script will have commands preceded by hash sign describing the steps. There are conditional tests such as value A is greater than value B, loops allowing us to go through massive amounts of data, files to read and store data, and variables to read and store data, and the script may include functions. Now we can say that there are two types of shell, Bourne shell and Conch shell. Let us first of learn about Bourne shell. Bourne shell is the original Unix shell written by Steve Bond of Bell Labs. It is available on all Unix systems. It was written by Steve Bond at AT&T and Bell Labs. It is the original Unix shell. It is faster and more preferred. It lacks feature for interactive use like the ability to recall previous command. It also lacks built-in arithmetic and logical expression handling. It is difficult shell for Solaris operating systems. Bond shell doesn't have the interactive facilities provided in the modern shell such as C shell and Corn shell. The Bond shell does not provide an easy to use language with which you can write shell script. A Bond shell interprets and execute user-defined command and provide command-based programming abilities. A Bond shell enables the writing and executing of shell script which provide basic program control flow, control over input output, file descriptors and all key features required to create script or structured program for shell. A Bond shell also execute command and function that are predefined or integrated. Files that search or follow a command path as well as text file commands. Accessing a Unix system. There are many ways that we can access a Unix system. The main mode of access to Unix machine is through a terminal, which usually include a keyboard and a video monitor. For each terminal connected to the Unix system, the kernel runs a process called a TTY that accepts input from the terminal and sends output to the terminal, which is referred as TTY. The processes are generated program and must be told the capabilities of the terminal in order to correctly read from and write to the terminal. If the TTY process receives incorrect information about the terminated type, unexpected results can occur. Console. Each Unix system has a main console that is currently directed to the machine. The console is a special type of terminal that is recognized when the system is started. Some Unix system operations must be performed at the console. Typically, the console is only accessible by the system operators and administrators. The Unix operating system is one of computing's most significant technology, providing the framework that the family Linux and Mac OS operating systems were developed on. Logging into the Unix system requires two pieces of information: username and password. Type your username at the login prompt and press the return key. The system will then ask for password. When we give the password, the screen will not display what you type. logging out. When we are ready to quit, type the command exit. Before we leave our terminal, make sure that we see the login prompt indicating that we have successfully logged out. If we have left any unresolved process, the Unix system will require us to receive them before it will let us log out. Some shells will recognize other commands to log you in, like logout or even BIOS. Advantages of Unix operating systems. Unix operating system is one of computing's most significant technologies. Unix is designed to maximize performance through economical memory use. The operating system uses protected memory, a memory allocation system whereby a given block of memory can only be accessed by one application at a time to enable full multitasking, allowing multiple users to run multiple applications without risking a system crash. In addition, Unix application generally requires a fairly smart amount of physical memory to run. Security is also one of the advantages of Unix. Unix enforces high security level by requiring that all the users authenticate to the system via username and password. Furthermore, all forms on the system must have own owner who can set specific permissions as to which user can not read or modify the file. The security system reduces the possibility that an authorized user could gain access to or tamper with the important files or documents given in a Unix operating system. Perhaps the Unix operating system, its ability to string commands and utilities together in unlimited ways to accomplish more complicated tasks. Disadvantages of Unix. Perhaps the primary disadvantage of Unix is the steep learning curve associated with using software. Using the operating system to its full potential requires learning the Unix shell commands. To use Unix well, we need to understand some of the main design features. Its powers come from knowing how to make commands and programs interact with each other, not just from treating each as a fixed black box. How Unix differs from operating system. Unix and operating system differ. Unix can have a GUI while DOS cannot. Unix is more secure than DOS. Unix can multitask while the DOS cannot. Unix is case sensitive while DOS is not. Unix uses forward slashes while DOS uses backward slashes. Unix is mainly used in server while DOS is used in embedded systems. Thank you for watching.